Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Author's Answer video for July 2025. The Author's Answer series was started by J.D. Archer and his writing group. They convened on a blog once upon a time and asked themselves weekly reading and writing related questions. And then some years back, J.D. Archer brought some of those questions over to his AuthorTube channel, and that's where I found them. I decided I would take these questions to my own AuthorTube niche of my BookTube channel. I'd answer them sequentially, starting from the first one and going on from there. I've been doing this for several years, and I have reached, on this, my birthday month, a very important milestone. I am up to question number 100. So question number 100 is, if you could take a writing class taught by any author, who would it be? And a lot of my answers to these questions tend to be informed by what I'm, personally reading or writing or am excited about right now. So I think that's where I'm going with this one as well, because I think I'd love a class by Samantha Shannon as I wait for the release of her latest St. George and the Dragon retelling novel, Among the Burning Flowers. I don't actually, I'm not sure if I remember if there's an official, title sequence name, but the fact that it is this like lavish, detailed, intricate retelling of St. George and the Dragon is why I'd want to be like in a class with her where she would talk about her world building inspirations, her research, and how she decided to put it all together. If she and other authors could, talk about their, outlining process in detail, I think that would still be fascinating, whether or not, I use something similar. But yeah, world building is a big thing for me. I'm fascinated by it. Maybe it would be a good idea for me too to hear an author who's similarly fascinated by world building, but also talk about the juxtaposition between the world building and also the plotting and the characterization in the actual, happening story. So that's my first thought. I'd love to hear from Samantha Shannon and how she created this absolutely lavish world that I'm so excited to get back into. I thought I'd continue on, though, and give some other examples as well. St. George and the Dragon being a very Christian tale to do a retelling of. I myself am writing a Jewish-inspired fantasy novel, and there's been plenty of Jewish fantasy novelists of late writing, in the contemporary age. In fact, right now I'm listening to The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare, which is book 2 in her sprawling series, where she, I think out of all of the Jewish fantasy I've read of late, she's the one who's succeeded the most in actually creating a sort of Jewish culture within her world. Most of these Jewish fantasy stories talk about Jews as a marginalized group in a larger society, which is actually different technically than what I'm doing with my first novel. But hers, Cassandra Clare's, actually, the community is, present and informs her Jewish character more than I think a lot of the other Jewish communities do in these other books. So I'd love to sit down with Cassandra Clare and to hear more about what Jewish inspiration she took and why. One that, really stands out to me at the moment is that she has a character in her story that visits the Salt, or the Jewish ghetto, called the Exilarth, who is this wandering sort of Jewish prince, and she based that off of an actual Babylonian figure who was in a leadership position for the Jews of the Babylonian exile. Of course, Cassandra Clare is writing a book that is loosely based off of medieval Venice and not ancient Babylonia, but that's the joy of fantasy, where you can, mix and match historical references. So I would love to hear about her inspirations in more detail, and I'd love to hear about how she goes about her, outlining process of juxtaposing that with the actual, storytelling. Although I have to say with both of these authors, and I think they're the ones I like most drawn to, they are writing these lavish worlds, and there's really detailed, complicated subplots, but at the same time, because they're both, famous authors, their books are allowed to be relatively long. I'm pretty sure The Ragpicker King is probably 140 to 150,000 words at least, and the books in the St. George and the retelling, starting with Priory of the Orange Tree, probably are closer to 200,000. I think this third book will be a little shorter, but the previous two were like about 200,000. And for me, as, a newbie trying to, get an agent maybe someday, I probably would have difficulty, coming in with anything over 100,000. 100,000 might actually be a bit much as well. So that's just something for me to consider when it comes to thinking about subplots and what the word count can bear. But yes, I mean, even beyond Cassandra Clare, there's a lot of other Jewish fantasy authors, especially I'm thinking of ones writing in secondary worlds like I am. I think in the YA space, which would make more sense for me anyway because I'm writing YA, there's Kaylin Josephson, who actually I think did something somewhat similar to Cassandra Clare and how she built up this city, and then how the Jewish population is understood in that city. I think, though, I think they're a little more distant, and we're only following one Jewish character. But I think that the world that she created, like for this horse racing city that she created for her duology, is intricate on its own. So I'd also love to hear from her. And there's plenty of other Jewish authors I've read who've written fantasy that I'd be intrigued to have like in a seminar setting as well. We have Eva Reed, Allison Saft, Ariel Kaplan, who wrote something slightly different and more portal fantasy, but somewhat similar. I'd just love to hear from her as well. And there's plenty of others I've, also just not read yet. But those are the ones I gravitated toward because of the Jewish secondary world, themes. And so, yeah. And speaking of seminars and workshops, the Jewish Book Council's annual writing conference is coming up soon, and I think they are accepting proposals right now for, conference sessions. So I'm hoping maybe we'll see some fantasy representation in that space. I'd like to wait for someone who, is more advanced in their career, take on the reins of that, but I think it would be very fascinating and certainly useful to those of us writing in the genre. So hopefully I can make this question into a reality of sorts. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave links to J.D. Archer's questions and his AuthorTube page and the blog down below, as well as my AuthorTube playlist where I've answered the 99 questions that came before this one and will continue on forward. I'll also leave information to all of the books I talked about in the upcoming JBC conference in case you're interested. And expect me back here on this channel in the near future with my July book haul. It'll be short and sweet, especially after last month's crazy one, but stay tuned for that. I'd also love to hear about what you are reading or what authors you'd like to talk to or get a class from and what you'd like to learn from them. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Keep writing, and I'll see you next time.